So if you own an 11 to 14 5-liter powered F-150 and you're looking for the most affordable closed element cold air intake in order to get that nice cold dense air to the motor and pick up some horsepower and torque in the process, then you should be checking out SMB's cold air intake with their oiled cleanable cotton filter. Now there are a lot of options available on the site, as I'm sure you've seen already, but most of them are open element designs. Now while those open element designs look cool, you can see the filter going to work underneath the hood. They do not do as good of a job at insulating that filter and getting that cold air to the motor as a closed element design like this one. Now normally people kind of avoid the closed element designs simply because they look a little boring, right? S&B actually tackled that issue. They got a really cool plexiglass window on the air box itself, so you can still see the filter underneath, and it even provides a good indication of when you need to actually clean that filter off and re-oil it. Now if you're curious what kind of gains you can get with a closed element design like this, take a look at our dyno graphs. We went ahead, we ran our truck on the dyno stock, and it made 280 horsepower and 305 pound-feet of torque. We then installed the S&B cold air intake, and we ended up making 289 horsepower and 319 pound-feet of torque. That makes for peak gains of 9 horsepower and 14 pound-feet of torque. But what's even more impressive are the curve gains. Relatively low on the RPM band, we saw curve gains as high as 44 horsepower and a whopping 85 pound-feet of torque. Now those are certainly very impressive numbers for any mod in general, right? Let alone for a cold air intake like this one. I'm also happy to say that it installs very easily, so it's pretty easy to pick up that kind of power. I'm going to give the install a very simple 1 out of 3 wrenches on my difficulty meter. This is definitely a mod that I would recommend for first timers. Very straightforward install, bolt-on job. I'll actually show you guys what exact tools you need in just a second. Then I'm going to walk you through the install step by step. Shouldn't take us more than 30 minutes to an hour, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, to install our new intake, you'll need a standard drive ratchet with an 8mm socket. You'll also need a T20 Torx bit, and you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver. Now, it's also helpful to have an extension. So before we remove our factory tube and air box, we have to disconnect some components first. We're going to tackle our MAP sensor. Go ahead and pull on the red clip underneath and gently squeeze and release. Then go ahead and tackle the 3 clips securing the top half of the air box to the bottom half. All right, next we're going to pull these 2 hoses on the factory air tube here. One's a breather hose and the other is the hose for your crankcase blow-by. Once you got those removed, go ahead and loosen the clamp, securing the tube to the throttle body using an 8mm socket. Now once you've loosened that clamp, you can pull the tube and the factory box out of the truck as one piece. So now we have our factory intake removed. You can see the differences and similarities between the new S&B system and the original one, and obviously the big thing that stands out here is we're ditching that crappy paper element filter, which does us no good as far as airflow goes, in favor of S&B's high flow conical filter. I also like the new intake tube because it's a lot nicer looking in terms of its finish and the overall construction of it, and we're getting rid of these crazy annoying little bendy things and all these resonator boxes. Overall, it's going to clean up the engine bay and make everything look a lot nicer. Now before we ditch the factory intake, we have to remove our MAP sensor and install it into our new intake tube. They do provide the hardware, as you can see here. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver, but to remove the MAP sensor from the factory tube, you're going to need a T20 Torx bit. All right, once you got your MAP sensor in place, you can go ahead and discard the factory intake system. You're not going to need it anymore. Next, we're going to install the rubber gaskets for the air box. We're also going to throw our filter in place, secure everything as one piece, and I'll show you guys how to actually get this clamp down to the throttle body inside the truck. All right, once you got the rubber gasket on the top of the air box, you can throw the intake tube in place through here, and then you can secure the air filter using the provided clamps. It's helpful to spray inside of here with some spray lubricant. Makes it a lot easier to get the intake tube in there. All right, so once you got your filter installed and everything's lined up nicely, go ahead and do a quick test fit on the bottom half of the factory air box. Make sure everything clears nicely. Once everything's in place, make sure that the inlet here on the tube lines up with the throttle body. Once you're happy with everything and where it's sitting, do a once over. Make sure you got all your connections where they're supposed to be. You want these two fittings on here for those breather hoses and those crankcase blow-by hoses. And then you want to make sure you got your rubber gasket on the end here with that clamp tightened down. Again, you'll need that 8mm socket to do so. Then you'll finally be ready to install the intake inside the truck. So let's go ahead and walk over there and show you guys what we're working with. All right, so before we install our new intake, I wanted to talk about something that you might have seen in the instructions. S&B tells you that you need to remove the bottom air box and pull this fitting out here. This is your cold air inlet. Now, I would consider this an optional step because the new filter and the new intake fit just fine with the factory inlet, and this honestly does not restrict airflow in any way, shape, or form. This is the new one that they want you to install, but if your factory inlet is in good shape, it's not cracked or leaking or anything like that, then I would consider this optional. Again, you don't need to install this. So let's go ahead and throw our new intake in place. All right, with your intake secured, we can start reinstalling these hoses here. Now there's an extension for this breather tube right here, so you want to pull this off of the connection like so, and replace it with the long tube in the kit, and then secure it to that black plastic barb fitting that's on the intake tube. Once you got that in place, you can go ahead and install your crankcase hose again. Make sure that's nice and tight. Then you want to install the extension for your MAF sensor connection. Go ahead and plug the new connection into the MAF sensor itself and mate the extension with the factory wiring harness. So as you can see, that install was very straightforward, right? That also wraps up my review of the S&B cold air intake with their oiled cleanable cotton filter fitting your 11 to 14 5-liter powered F-150. I'm Travis, thanks for watching, and for all things F-150, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.